I've had an interest in television since I was an infant. My mom always tells me that I used to be able to sit in front of the TV for hours, completely transfixed to whatever was on the screen. This isn't surprising to me considering who I am today and how much visuals appeal to me. However, what I've come to learn recently is that the experience of watching television and what people my age associate with television from their childhood varies quite a bit from person to person. I grew up in the early 2000s, and growing up my family had the basic cable package. I didn't grow up with That's So Raven, Boy Meets World, or any of those classic sitcom shows. I didn't grow up with Disney Channel or Family Channel as it's called here in Canada. Instead, I grew up with its freaky next door neighbor, YTV. And as funny as it sounds to say out loud, I'm actually pretty grateful for this. I think much of the programming on the channel, as well as its general aesthetic and original content, has helped shape my interests and got me interested in media at a very young age. So, without indulging too far into a complete nostalgia trip for me and me alone, I'd like to talk about the different elements of the channel that made an impact on me personally, along with a bit of nostalgia just for good measure. This is why I'm thankful for YTV.
And now, live from the Terrace in Toronto, to launch YTV's program service for Canada's kids and their families, the Honourable Flora MacDonald.
Good evening.
YTV was launched in 1988 in Canada, with the first show being hosted by Canadian icon John Candy. The channel always had programming targeted towards youth and teenagers. However, it wasn't until the early and mid-90s that the channel really cemented its own unique and offbeat style. One of the things that set YTV apart from its counterparts was its overall aesthetic, specifically in the most infamous programming block, The Zone. This was seen not only in programming, but in its own hosts and their personalities, referred to as PJs or program jockeys, promo material, and even things down to the announcer of their commercials. They had a very evident and obvious brand, and it was offbeat and weird. Perhaps what really kicked off this idea was their Keep It Weird campaign, in which this phrase appeared in a multitude of their commercials, bumpers, and really all over the network. To return to the hosts, or PJs, for a moment, it was the hiring of these young, exuberant hosts with strong personalities which I believed helped YTV make a name for itself as well. For me, when I think of YTV, I think of the hosts of My Time Watching, which were Sugar and Carlos, who are certainly iconic hosts. However, even before them, characters like PJ Phil, Pat, Ashana, Paul, and Snit helped to set YTV apart. Right out of the gate, YTV was on the cutting edge of Canadian mid-90s and 2000s culture, while also going against the grain in a lot of ways. Everything from the channel's aesthetic itself to the hosts made that abundantly clear. As a kid, I remember being just as excited for these in-between segments as I was for the actual shows themselves. The personalities and funny segments, along with contests, special guests, and bits hooked me right away, and there was a certain comfort I felt in feeling like I really knew the people on the screen. I want to talk more about the channel itself and its original programming, but before that, I think it's important to note what came on YTV, how the blending of various programming on the channel helped to further its own identity, and why I'm thankful for it.
The less distractions that are out there, the more you can focus on learning, and that's kind of why everybody's in school at the first place, right? Whew! Pretty tough though, you know? No CDs. I mean, I got to learn about all the different religions in my school, and I just wound up believing in nothing. I'm just kidding. Oh man, I believe in golf. That's what I believe in. Oh, is that the phone? Is that for me? Are You Afraid of the Dark's up next. We'll see you after that.
I use the word identity because as a kid growing up in an era where TV is booming, what you consume helps to form your identity. In fact, I legitimately think that I would be a different person today with different interests if I wasn't exposed to some of the programming on YTV. I could do an entire video about many of these shows here alone, but what I want to do instead is just do a quick run over some of the shows that stick out to me from my youth, how they impacted me in some way, and how all of these shows work together to build the general vibe and aesthetic of YTV. Where other Canadian channels such as the aforementioned Family Channel aired Disney Channel programming, YTV, in true fashion of their whole brand, aired programming owned by Nickelodeon. First and foremost, I'd like to mention the show that probably had the biggest influence on me, and it seems many people around my age, SpongeBob SquarePants. I won't dwell on this, especially because it's not specifically related to YTV, but I think a lot of my eclectic tastes and interest in bizarre and offbeat comedy and media in general stems from my early introduction to SpongeBob by way of YTV, specifically in its first and second seasons. You can take any episode from these two seasons and find some strange, complicated jokes, weird facial expressions, and outrageous plot points. I truly believe that this show alone really helped define my interests today, and of course much of Nickelodeon's content at this time found a perfect home on YTV. The Nickelodeon channel itself had a similar aesthetic to YTV, branded as programming for kids meant to be seemingly made by kids. So, although a lot of Nickelodeon programming that I saw in my young age was impressionable on me, I was just at that prime age for SpongeBob. However, once YTV had hooked its claws into me, I came to learn that there was more to the channel than SpongeBob that would help shape my interests today.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Voiceman. Actually, I get my pedicures at the vet. Hey, it's time to meet our masters of mayhem, slashing Sam and Tara and Aaron.
The next show I probably have the most to say about from this channel would be Uh-Oh, a bizarre, slime-themed game show in which a Jim Carrey-esque over-the-top host named Wink Yahoo led a series of various, often bizarre games and controlled a man in a full leather suit called the Punisher, who would often have to pour slime over the kids who failed the challenges. And before I go too far, let me just say I remember the show less because it impacted me in some way, but more for how bizarre and entertaining it was. There's not much more to say or analyze about this show, and there are plenty of great videos regarding its history and production. There are a couple things that do stick out to me though. The show traveled around Canada to shoot its episodes, so it was interesting seeing familiar landmarks during the episodes. Another cool element of this show to me as a kid was the fact that all of the contestants were kids, just like me. As a kid, seeing other kids your age on TV always feels cool, so this show definitely made an impression on me as a kid, and probably explains my open-mindedness to bizarre media.
Can you walk like a dragon? Can you talk like a dragon? Dance about...
Two other shows I'd like to throw in the mix here too are The Adventures of Dudley the Dragon and The Big Comfy Couch. I put these shows together for a couple of reasons. First of all, I was at a younger age when I watched those shows, so they were a little bit before my prime TV watching age. However, both of these shows introduced me to puppetry and interesting set design. I don't think I understood that at the time, but I believe these shows set the groundwork for me to appreciate the other behind-the-scenes elements of television and film, as well as a small but genuine interest and appreciation for puppetry. Another show definitely worth a mention here is Goosebumps.
Let's wait for Goosebumps.
This show introduced me to a variety of interests of mine that still carry over today. In the behind-the-scenes realm, the creative costume and set design always stood out to me, but also the show introduced me to horror at a young age. Although slightly traumatizing, I still often go back and watch episodes of the show today. Standing out from a multitude of safe, kid-friendly programming, Goosebumps also helped to create the alternative style that YTV was creating. This doesn't even begin to skim the surface of shows that I remember and love from YTV. There are plenty of other shows that I could discuss, such as Pokemon, Video and Arcade Top 10, and Rugrats, just to name a few. But I think those mentioned help to explain the variety of programming offered on YTV that stood out to me as a kid. However, as much as I would love to spend hours on these shows alone, there is more to YTV than just the shows that aired on it. Before going into some of the original programming and events that I believe made YTV so special, I feel like I would not be doing any Canadian who grew up in the 90s or early 2000s justice without mentioning some of the commercials that aired on the channel. Advertising has changed a lot since this time, and rules and the ways in which companies and organizations appeal and speak to children has also changed a lot. But as silly as it probably sounds, there are commercials from the channel that I remember more vividly than shows I watched. This is a bizarre fixation of mine. I will spend hours going down rabbit holes on YouTube, watching archives of recordings from YTV, specifically with commercials included, to see what I can remember. More so than products, I believe the most iconic of these commercials to be aired by the concerned children's advertisers of Canada. These commercials often use clever and interesting ways to teach kids about a variety of topics, anything from health to spending time outdoors to not putting things in your mouth.
Don't you put it in your mouth, Till you ask someone you love, that's right, sis.
to not believing everything you see on TV. These all speak for themselves, but these are actually such an integral part to the channel as well, as advertisements that show concern for children and speaking to them directly help to build this community that YTV was building on their channel. This channel was for kids and spoke directly to kids.
June 12th is a very special day.
That's right, because it's National Kids Day. And on June 11th, the day before National Kids Day,
No, not me.
Not Phil. Paul and Darren are going to be at Nathan Phillips Square.
Friday, June 11th, present all the pennies that we're collecting here at YTV, right over there.
Television programming and commercials aside, I like to discuss the ways in which the original elements of the channel help to nail down the channel's offbeat and eccentric aesthetic. First of all, this can be seen in their original commercials and bumpers. This is where YTV made its style abundantly clear, featuring weird aliens and monsters sporting their logo, and oftentimes a wacky narrator making jokes and explaining what was coming on next. As far as original content goes, what I'm mostly referring to is not shows produced by YTV, but instances in which they hosted special events involving their hosts. I won't go over all of it, however there are a few of note. A prime example of this would be Dark Night, in which on Halloween night, a short film of sorts would be played in between whatever programming was on, in which the host would act in different horror scenarios, such as being bitten by a vampire and attacking the other hosts. Or around Christmas, when hosts would read out letters to Santa or funny stories to the audience. The hosts of YTV celebrated these events along with the viewers, and they weren't afraid to go the extra mile to make these times of year special. Even outside of special events such as Halloween or Christmas, the programming block The Zone featured many skits and ongoing stories between the hosts. Special guests such as people dress up in various costumes would sometimes disrupt the show. Sometimes the host would engage in stunts like waxing their eyebrows or meeting live animals. What I'm trying to say is that oftentimes these segments had as much entertainment value as the shows themselves. These segments, along with the channel's original commercials, bumpers, and everything they produced, all worked together to keep the channel weird, and they succeeded.
Over 5 million hits served every week. Served fresh, served scrumptious, and check out the new shopping page, Store Galore. www.ytv.com. We likes to serve.
Keep it away on YTV.
The final way that YTV built their whole aesthetic was actually off the screen, through various promotions and products. To stay on the cusp of popular culture, YTV curated popular music on their Big Fun Party Mix CDs, sometimes even featuring music created by the hosts themselves. YTV was also very interested in their website, creating a variety of games and activities to attract the age of kids such as myself, who are starting to grow up with the internet at the forefront. One of these was an avatar called a Sidekick that you could play games with and customize. Side note, the community of fans have recently remastered and brought back this game, along with a lot of other games that were listed on the website. That has nothing to do with what I'm talking about, but I thought it was pretty cool. By following a lot of the trends of the early 2000s and maintaining their brand on and off the screen, YTV was successfully able to grow into more than just a TV channel. I think what the YTV that I grew up with represents is a cultural force that was rooted in counterculture. Where other channels had cute characters as their mascots, YTV had gross aliens and monsters. Where other channels had family movie night or nightly picks, YTV had 3 hairy thumbs up. Other channels had hosts and personalities to maintain order and flow. YTV had hosts who became a part of the chaos that the channel was going for by entertaining children even between shows. By going against the grain, while also appealing to a broad audience with its variety of popular and even critically acclaimed shows, YTV hit that perfect balance that was very impressionable on a young me. As for where YTV stands today, it's a different landscape for sure. Carlos, one of the oldest, longest running hosts, has officially retired, and the channel's vibe and brand has shifted to be more modern and less weird. And of course, the programming is entirely different as well. However, if it wasn't obvious so far, YTV was a product of its time. So it would be unfair to say that YTV is bad or not as fun now, because the adaptability is what made this so great during my youth. By engaging in all popular things of the time, YTV was able to hit that target demographic of weird kids and make us proud to be weird. This is probably my nostalgia glasses talking, but I think one of the biggest disappointments when it comes to media consumption for children today is the loss of the channel. And what I mean by the channel is the whole composition of the channel, its programming, and the blocks it's organized into, the host who led the programming, and all the commercials, bumpers, and special events in between. With the rise of streaming, the aesthetic vibe and brand of the channel has been lost. the comfort that I felt in these channels of flipping to a channel and knowing what to expect and who I would be seeing is something I only appreciate now that I don't have it anymore. However, the internet makes it possible to put myself back in front of that TV and relive some of these memories. So, if you ever find yourself with some spare time, I recommend revisiting a TV channel from your youth and looking up some videos and information about it. Maybe you'll remember a TV show or a moment from watching. And sometimes, as we grow up and away from our past selves, these archives and memories are the strongest thread we have to who we used to be as kids.
Have a great flight, be safe.
I will. I'm gonna miss you guys too. I'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.
I'm off to Hollywood.
Good luck.
Bye. Hands.
Good. Okay.
Thanks for listening. Take it easy.
And then you can have the guy doing them right in the front. I mean, you know, like.
What do you mean, doing me? That's not very nice.
I mean, you know, oh, I forgot.